Hello and welcome to Creative Outcomes. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Watson, one of the original founding partners here of Upsourced. I am joined by another of the original founding partners of Upsourced, Craig Baldwin. Craig, what's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you, Ryan? I'm glad we can come together and talk about this very important topic today.
We'll get a juicy topic today. This is, I feel like this phrase is something. I mean, if I had to do a like control F on the Upsource Slack channel for the most commonly used phrase that we use to describe the difference between good behavior and bad behavior, it would be this one. And that phrase
Yeah.
is playing business. Playing business is a thing we love to, it's a term we love to use at Upsourced. I think even trademark, I'll give you the trademark. Trademark
Yep.
Upsourced, trademark Craig Baldwin, as just kind of a broad term to describe the symptoms of business owners who are maybe making poor choices or expressing bad behavior in certain circumstances. So, because you are the trademarkee or trademarker, why don't you describe for folks what do we mean when we say a business owner or an agency is playing business?
Yeah. Well, and hey, let me just say this up front is, we're talking about this topic not because we're here to make fun or point fingers or because we think we're better than others. It's actually quite the opposite. We get very invested in the relationships that we have with our clients. And we've seen many, many clients over the 13 years that we've been in business now go through really tough times to the extent of eventually going out of business and sometimes having disastrous consequences to their own personal financial health, right? And so we've seen that so many times and it is so painful to watch happen that I often I use this example in other situations. Um, but I liken it to being like a hospice nurse when we know the signs and symptoms of businesses who are on their last leg. And I hate to put it in such morbid terms, but sometimes it does kind of feel that way. And so, what we wanted to do was have a session, the two of us together, which we could jointly identify some patterns that we see in organizations who just they may not be out of business or on the way to out of business quite yet, but they exhibit behavioral traits or symptoms which really raises questions with us as the organization who's helping them with their financial statements and overall financial health. And we're going to bring them up because we want you to avoid them in the future, to be honest with you. And again, we don't have all the answers, and we have been guilty of some of these mistakes ourselves in the past. And so maybe that's why we even have a right to talk about it, because we've learned from a lot of our own mistakes and have suffered our own personal ruin or business ruin, whatever you want to call it, right? So I don't want that for other people. That's why we're here to talk about it.
And honestly, I think of it in that context too. I mean, I think if the business that I know is most guilty of having played business in its life is probably our own. And again, it's an intentionally kind of somewhat provocative term. But to be honest with you, it's not like I mean, it's as Craig, as you said, it's not meant to make fun of our behavior or anybody else's. It's actually quite easy to find yourself um, in this habit of playing business because, and we can define kind of what we mean, but you know, playing business is one of those things where, and this is how I often describe it, playing business is when you are doing things that feel like they're productive. You're busy, you're taking action. They make you feel like, hey, I did a good thing today. I was running my business. But in reality, the actions were completely disconnected from what is actually needed to move the ball forward for your business, right? They made you feel good. And by the way, as human beings, we are often pre programmed to go do the easy thing that makes us feel good, that makes us feel productive. When in reality, the thing that the business needs is actually not the easy thing that makes us feel productive. It's the really hard thing that maybe we don't even know how to solve or do. And so, again, it's not an indictment on people or ourselves for having done this in the past. It's very understandable. But when you start to recognize the patterns where you're choosing the easy thing that makes me feel the candy and not the nutrition, then you can start to spot that behavior in yourself and pull back and say, wait a minute, what should I actually be doing right here?
Yes, thank you for actually. defining it after you asked me to define it, and I didn't. I liked the candy and nutrition reference, and, listen, the other thing I just wanna call out, because I think this is a lot of the reason why it happens, is for many business owners who have started a business and probably been running their own business for quite some time, and, we're here to talk specifically about agencies. It becomes a big part of their identity, and so because of that, it's easy to get entrenched and defensive and wear that identity with a badge of honor, but sometimes to the detriment of the business itself, right? And I think in the culture that we live in today and the connectivity that we have with many other business owners or many other people who we might consider peers or on the same level, whether that's on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever else, right? It's really easy to puff your chest out and do things for looks or show, or like you said earlier, play business, when in fact it's not objectively the right thing to do for your business. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about this particular topic, which is how do you differentiate between um, the very natural human desire or subconscious bias, which we all have, which is ingrained in our cerebellum over hundreds of thousands of years, and separate that from the much more rational, reflective side of our brain where we're actually trying to be very logical no matter what the answer may be. And that's really challenging to do. And I think it's really challenging to do in agencies, especially for marketing and creative firms where it is a keeping up with the Joneses type industry. It is very, I don't want to say fashion oriented, but who can do the best, splashiest, most interesting creative. There's a lot of what can I do to keep up and what can I do to make myself stand out. And again, sometimes that behavior of those lines of thinking are at odds with the constructive nature of the business that we're trying to build, you know?
Yep, totally. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so how about we do this? Let's spend, a part of the discussion and let's get really explicit, really granular about examples of behavior. And again, I want to preface, if you're watching, it's quite likely that you might hear yourself in one of these things. I don't want that to be triggering for anybody. I hear myself in all of these things, at least one time in history, right? So you might hear yourself, and we're not talking to anybody. I don't have a client in mind, but we're all guilty of doing these things. So let's just be really clear about some activities that I think we can all relate to that are symptoms of playing business. And then we can talk about, like, here are some more productive behaviors that you should take instead of these. So why don't we just fire them out? I'll fire some, you fire some. Let's get into it. So here's my first clear example of like some playing business, and this is like I don't know. I'll kind of like broadly describe it as like spending money you don't have or investing ahead of growth. I love to hear this term, like we're just we're investing ahead of growth, and like explicitly I see this happen, where it's like I've got a small business and I feel like I need to build out this like comprehensive leadership team of people, like, a chief strategy officer and a chief head of human resources. And, there's only 8 people doing service, but we've got to have a leadership team of 5. Or situations where I see folks that are like building these lavish offices where it's this wonderful place that they feel really proud of and they can bring people into, except for they don't ever actually have in-person meetings and half of their team is distributed and none of this stuff is needed in the first place. So these are, I feel like in some cases we feel productive by spending, and it's very easy for us to convince us that we can't grow unless we have this base level of infrastructure. So this is an important thing for us to do. And that's wrong. none of those areas of spend are required for the growth that's needed. So anyway, that's my first symptom.
Especially in today's world where the marginal cost of starting an agency or even growing it is so small compared to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? Um, I I'm going to take this a little bit deeper. I think you have a lot to say about this topic, but I just want to take something a little bit deeper here, which is it's more symptomatic of a very common trait I see, which is when we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, we look for proxies for our behavior, right? I like to use the example quite often of when I don't know how to make the dish, I look up recipes. and I try to use those recipes to produce the dish I think I'm supposed to make. But I'll be honest with you, even when I follow that recipe step by step, rarely does it taste as good as it did in the restaurant when I had it, right? Or from the originator of that recipe. And so I think in lieu of knowing the answer ourselves or knowing what to do or feeling certain about our performance or our growth, we will look to other places which we feel are kind of like check the box items or recipes or steps to success. And we'll say, well, if I do XYZ, then I will be successful as well. But I think often it misses the point. And to what you said earlier, it actually leads to an organization who's going to spend money on things that they don't need. And we don't have a lot of room or a lot of margin for error, especially in the early days of an agency. Every dollar matters. And more likely than not, we just need that on additional capacity if we have brought in the requisite revenue. And so that's a really painful one that we see quite a bit.
Well, look, your point about searching for proxies, assuming there's some sort of playbook out there that everybody has that you don't have, or some kind of magic bullet I can get to, that's really common behavior. I have so much empathy for why you would feel like that is true and you are on the outside looking in, especially if you spend any time in LinkedIn these days. I mean, let me just tell you this right now. If you find yourself commenting report or download or playbook in the comments of LinkedIn like more than twice a week, that might be symptomatic of playing business. Again, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I just mean that in it feels like somebody else out there has this thing that you don't have. And let me just give you the permission to believe it's not true. It's definitely not true. And even if there was a playbook that worked for one person's business, you do this long enough, you realize none of these apply perfectly apples to apples to your own situation. All these things are very nuanced. You just have to, I mean, again, you have to run controlled experiments on your own business and learn what works with your unique set of skills and your specific positioning and the group of people you have around the table, and going out and looking from others or hiring like 5 different coaches who are all going to come in and tell you this is how you run this thing or that thing. These things are just a drain on money and they're an outrageous distraction. And honestly, they're undermining from your own confidence, which is ultimately where you're going to derive the answers.
Yeah. And I hate to say this to even clients that we work with, but the answer is always in the work, right? And to your point, every business and every situation and every client relationship is while it may not be unique, it is different from the next one. And so to think that I can apply someone else's template to my business and that will lead to success is Pollyannish, I guess, at best. And um, I think for anyone who is of requisite intelligence and skill, that if they just continue to apply effort to their own set of problems and find the answer for themselves and what works best for their situation and their business, that will lead them, while maybe frustrating, will lead them to a much better result than trying to apply solutions from someone else. Just my experience.
Totally agree. Well, okay, so here's another one for me that's kind of like an offshoot. Well, actually, here, let me say a thing. That I'm going to circle back to this topic of spending money that we don't have and applying other people's playbook. And I'm thinking specifically around this concept of hiring a bunch of, like, so often we get this. Oh, I'm hiring ahead of demand, or I need to build up the team before we service the revenue, or all that kind of stuff. We had a mentality at the agency that I worked with or ran that was we hire when it hurts, and which is kind of the opposite of hiring ahead of growth. We hire when it hurts. And you can do that in a service business, right? Ultimately, the very difficult thing in service is generating demand. Anybody who says otherwise is crazy. That's the hard thing. That's the hardest thing for all of us to do. We know how to service the work. We know the profile of person we're looking for. Go get the demand. And then when we have it and it hurts, we will go get the team that we need in order to perform the service and supply the work. Okay. The thing I was going to say is that's kind of an offshoot of this topic is um, like always looking for the shiny new software or tool or platform. Like, those folks who have, like, if you're on your third or fourth project management suite because this one has this new tech, this new feature set or whatever, that might be indicative of avoiding the hard things and papering over it with things that feel like might be productive when they really aren't.
Yep. Well, and the analog I like to use, or analogy I like to use in this situation is, I hate to use this one. It's kind of cheesy and maybe inappropriate, but it's like taking care of your health and if you have to lose weight, right? And if you're constantly looking for the next exercise, diet, or yeah, whatever, or fitness trainer, whatever it may be, and you find yourself cycling through many without the results, then maybe it's not about the tool or the diet or whatever that may be, right? It's about the level of commitment and the level of effort dedicated to the activity. And again, I totally get the human instinct, which is I wish I could just buy my way out of this problem that I have. But man, oh man, 9 times out of 10, that just doesn't exist. It's usually something you have to dig yourself out of, phone call by phone call, or project by project, or month by month, as you're trying to get your business to where you want it to be. And I know many of us don't have the appetite for that, or um, it can feel overwhelming when things are challenging, but there's no other answer, in my opinion, than to do that. It's not to say you shouldn't be looking for great technology. I think those things are really great optimizations for an already functioning agency, but I would not look to them to solve material problems in the way that I operate day to day. At least for most agencies, I think that there are some agencies of serious scale who maybe have gross margin problems or service delivery problems that could be helped by better workflow and maybe better software. But for most organizations, especially those under $5 million a year, I don't think a piece of software is the delta between your success and not being successful.
Well, and you always had a phrase that I often borrow, which was like everybody thinks they have a software problem. In reality, they have a process problem. And in reality, like I think your point about optimization is right. A new piece of software is not going to take you from not doing a thing to doing a thing. That's not the difference, right? All it's going to do is take you from doing a thing in one amount of time to doing that same thing in maybe less time. Like it's going to make you more efficient at the things you're already doing. And that has value, but it's not going to fundamentally change how you deliver work. So, of course, it has its place. We like technology. We use technology. We recommend technology. It's not going to save your business or turn anything around or anything like that. And if you're consistently cycling through them, that's probably a problem. Here's another one. So, this is a little bit niche, maybe even more dramatic, but it's definitely more obvious. Um, Anytime I start to hear people talk about like, I'll broadly describe it as like capital markets related things. So like I'm going to go out and I think I need to raise some money in order to like scale this business. Or I'm a $2 million agency and we were thinking about maybe buying another agency or something like that, right? Where it's like that certainly feels like that would be an accomplishment, a feather in your cap, something very interesting. That's something that grown up business people do. But for the most part, it has very, very limited place in the service space. Specifically on the capital raising side, I can think of very few reasons why an agency under 10 million would have any business raising capital for, quite frankly, any reason. And to be honest with you, uh 95% of situations, and I think it's much higher than that, but I'll just be conservative. 95% of situations, buying another business is the wrong answer. It's and not to go down a rabbit hole of this, but I was just kind of thinking about this. Man, we've I've seen a lot of data points of one business buying another business, and some of our clients, many of are not our clients, just people I'm familiar with. And to be honest with you, I have seen very few instances of it working really well for the buyer. And I'm not suggesting that like buying a business that can't work. Of course it can. We know examples of it working, but it's just to say that like it doesn't work a lot. It doesn't work a lot, and so it is often not a good choice. So it's just another like looking for a magic bullet, doing a thing that seems like more mature businesses are doing. I got to get on that same bandwagon and cut yourself some slack. You shouldn't be participating in any of those things in all likelihood.
Why, in your estimation, why do those acquisitions not work out for the buyer, or why have you seen them not work out for the buyer? Is it a bunch of reasons? Is it one in particular? Like, what are the commonalities?
I think that Um, it's like when I buy something, I am what I'm seeking to do is I'm seeking to buy an asset that generates a rate of return, like cash flow, right? Like so a perfect example of that is stock. Like a security. Hey, I'm going to buy a share in Apple and it's going to make money and I'm going to get that money back. It could be something more tangible like a house. Like, okay, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to rent it, it's going to generate cash flow, right? It's an asset, it has value, it has some predictable amount of cash. Most service businesses are not really income producing assets. They're a messy group of people that has no predictable forward looking return at all. It's like at any given moment, it's worthless. Like the go to zero risk for a service business is very, very high up to very, very mature stages. And so people consistently under, that doesn't mean like you can't do it, but it's not like you just like, oh, I'll just buy that thing, bolt it on, it'll just keep on generating cash flow. It doesn't work that way. They're very, very messy in order to integrate them into your organization and replace existing very important components of the business like owners. And it's just they're these really complex organisms, and you disrupt one little domino and the whole thing falls over, and now it isn't its former self. And people just they consistently underestimate that fact. And so then you find yourself with this you know shadow of its former self.
Well, yeah, and the only places that I've seen it be very successful are situations where that is the intended or intentional strategy of the organization as a whole, and that is usually, to be honest with you, like PE backed and has multiple people who are only combing the market to find opportunity and have it be real tangible opportunity, right? Like there's real value in that acquisition, and maybe they're getting a better than market price, maybe that they see cash flow there that the rest of the market does not, whatever that may be. So they're making sure that there's real value when it comes in. They are very intentional about their integration of that asset, and those clients and those people. They're probably going to strip away some of the operating expenditures of that acquisition because they don't need all the things that come with that agency. And then, they'll bolt on a few more. And that was especially common in a world where capital was so cheap for the last decade. And we're kind of out of that phase now, right? And that market, by the way, is like 100 times more efficient than it was a decade ago. There's just way less opportunity than there was. But we like to listen to those stories and think, well, I can do that. That's much easier than thinking about the next 3 years of really hard work and getting on the plane all the time and pitching all these clients. And so I don't want to dismiss those who are interested in acquisitions. I talked to a client this morning about that, and I think they have a really good um, they have a really good head on their shoulders about how to consider such a thing. But man, oh man, it's a much bigger endeavor than I think most clients realize, and comes with way more risk than they're realizing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing that I have learned, it's just that everything is hard. Nothing is easy. There is no shortcut. Everything is hard. So like if it feels like it'd be really hard to double the business by going out and getting a bunch more revenue, of course, it is hard. It's just as hard. It is just as hard to buy a business of the same size and integrate it and have it be successful. Like it's not easier. Everything is hard. And as long as you're clear about that, like your point about PE, of course, this is a professional organization who does this for a living. They have a bunch of reps and they understand the difficulty and they have an apparatus to execute it. It can be done, but most people just underestimate the level of difficulty and then don't put the adequate support behind it, and then it just crumbles.
Yep. Okay, so let me bring up the next one then, because I think this might dovetail nicely into. We've seen it very frequently that an owner in particular, and I think this is most common of solo owners of agencies. It's less common when we see an agency that's owned by multiple parties. But a solo owner, certainly they may pay us for our accounting and financial advisory services, which we would always support. But they might pay us for additional advising, and then they may have a group of other consultants that they're paying. They might have a biz dev or a RFP search or sales consultant. They might have a consultant who's approached them and said, "Hey, I know how to get your business ready for a sale, and I'm going to take you through the process. And I have this financial scheme I'm going to put in front of you to get a return for myself, but also you'll have a return." They may have an HR consultant. All that to say, what's really going on is it is not uncommon for us to see owners who have hired like a ton of coaches and a ton of consultants. And what and not that I'm not against that for the record, but what it's symptomatic of is this behavior where I'm opting out of running my own business and I'm constantly looking to other people to do that for me. And I think the challenge with that is those people are not thinking about your business 24 hours a day like you are. They don't know everything that is going on behind the scenes. They're just coming in on an hour phone call or a 30-minute phone call or once a month to give their opinion on a particular situation. And you still need to filter that opinion and make a very good professional judgment on what needs to be done in your business. But what they say is not gospel. And I say that to clients that I work with myself. Like, what I'm telling you is what I'm seeing, but I may not have all the right information. And so I want you to filter what I tell you. We see this a lot, unfortunately, and it's really concerning behavior, beside the fact that they're just spending way too much money on these services that really aren't adding that much value, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I have a specific point of view on this whole industry that I think I'll maybe just save for myself. But I totally agree with you. I think there's a time and a place, but often it is kind of a low return endeavor. Okay, real quick, Craig, are there any other? We spent a lot of time beating us all collectively up about all the things that we do that are endemic of playing business or indicative of playing business. Uh, is it? Should we shift the conversation to what kinds of behaviors should we focus on that help us avoid this trap of playing business? Is now the time?
Before we do that, can I give one more?
Yes. Go ahead.
Can I give one more?
Yes,
Sorry,
please do.
because it's just kind of near and dear to my heart, which is, and it is a culmination of all the things we talked about. But I do think it's important to talk about this idea of a lot of organizations that we have worked with in the past, and maybe even some today, really struggle to produce repeatable pipeline, which means they really struggle to produce repeatable revenue. And you said this earlier, that is the main um, problem, or that is the main hypothesis of any agency, especially under like $5 million a year in revenue, that you can continue to produce business either from current or future clients. That is the hardest thing to do. And I find that owners love to treat that activity as an afterthought. And then by the time they get to the point where they've run out of revenue, they have no pipeline, they think they can just hire their way or hire a consultant or hire an RFP specialist to get them out of that situation. Um, and by then, like, wow, things are really dangerous at that point, right? No one's going to get you out of a circumstances like that. You are far into the danger zone at that point. But I want to talk about or emphasize this because it's so critical to never let yourself get to that point in the first place if you can help it, right? To always be focused on your pipeline, to always be producing revenue. And when you're not, to be very realistic about the expenditures that you're carrying in your organization and what that means for the future. And so that's just a nice way of saying, like, if we need to cut some people, let's cut some people now, right? Let's not wait 3 months or 6 months or until I'm out of cash or I'm drawn on the line of credit, because that's when real personal devastation happens. And I hate seeing that for owners.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad that you brought it up because obviously, as you know, as we mentioned, and this isn't the creative business. Every business, the hardest thing to do is to generate demand. I mean, that's the, that we all got into our business because we could generate the supply, we could do the work, we could build the widget. Like that's why we all did it. But the hardest thing for any of us to do is to generate the demand. And we often, for those of us that are not, germane to business development or sales, we can often fall into sort of playing business behaviors where we're doing a bunch of little busy work that's like, all right, I'm doing sales and marketing, I'm putting effort into it without any like concern for what's the return or is it working or is it not. So and I'll say this lightly because I know we have some clients who have done this before, but I can say that I haven't seen a lot of clients have enormous amounts of success with this strategy. One thing that we see sometimes that is sometimes concerning for me is devoting a disproportionate amount of time on things like open RFPs. Like this is just one example that I'm going to pick on. And when I say open RFPs, I mean like this is a cattle call. Like I can go in some sort of public domain and see anybody and their brother can submit to this RFP. I have never seen anyone successful with that as a primary strategy for generating business. RFPs can be successful. There's lots of closed RFPs where I am invited to participate alongside two or three others because they know my capabilities. Not talking about that. That's perfectly reasonable. I'm talking about I don't know this person from Adam. I've never met anybody on the team. I just saw this on some sort of website. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. Never seen that work. And again, that's just one of many examples where it's like I'm doing a bunch of work, and I'm wishing and praying, versus being really disciplined and diligent about understanding what sorts of activities have been successful in generating pipeline and investing in only those activities and cutting the things that are not working.
Yep. Yep. Totally. All right. I won't harp on traits of those who are just playing business anymore. Let's talk about agencies who are really running a business and having success and building something really great. One of the smaller things that I've noticed about agencies who do this, one of the traits they have that I find time and time again is that they properly disseminate responsibility within their organization. That is to say, the owner doesn't take the responsibility for necessarily everything, although at the end of the day, they are to blame if things go wrong. But they have lieutenants or leaders or management in their business who have swim lanes they're responsible for and they report on and they collaborate on some frequency. And it's that type of dynamic that leads to an organization who not only can you focus on your side of the business and I can focus on mine, but when it's time to collaborate and talk about what's working and what's not, we have no egos about coming together and trying to get better for each other's sake, right? The organizations that I see that are successful do that very well. And as they continue to scale, they continue to push responsibility out into the business to make that organization feel smaller over time. So that's one thing that I really like to see from an agency that comes through the door and talks to us very early on.
Totally agree. I often call these people deputies, and we talk a lot. Shout out Grow Mode Playbook. We've got a whole a whole guide on this topic specifically, and building deputies and setting goals and holding them accountable and incentivizing them, so I love that. Let me. Well, my next one is even simpler than that and broader than that. And by the way, I think most of these things are just kind of the antithesis to all the examples that we were giving before. But I'd say like agencies that have success and generate revenue and profit have focus. So, like so many of the things that we described, obsessing over new technology, getting obsessed with raising money or buying some other business, or this need to like build out a killer office space or hire chief of whatever role. It's just a distraction. It's like professional ADD kind of stuff versus I'm going to be singularly focused on the main thing that we're here to do and what's going to, I'll give you credit, Craig. Anytime we often think about some ancillary, I know I'm guilty of this, by the way, of like losing focus and being enamored with, ooh, what if we like added this additional service that could be, symbiotic in some way? You're always bringing us back to like, is that a better use of our time than just getting better at the core thing we do? And oftentimes the answer is no, it's not.
I think that's because I have a lower IQ than you do. So I realize the importance of having to focus on something and get better at it over time. And I often view our ability to commit ourselves to an endeavor and stay focused on that endeavor and get better every single day, much like a craftsman might do. That is a competitive advantage that one of the few that I have against the world is my ability to stay focused. I think there was there's an old, maybe it's a Ben Horowitz quote or something that says, keep the main thing. But that is exactly what you need to do in your agency, and strip out all the noise and all the distractions and all the professional ADD that you talked about, because that is exactly the type of thing that'll get you in hot water. And I say this to our clients all the time, that we are going to deliver you a set of organized, timely, and accurate financial statements every single month, along with some other KPIs or metrics which are critical to your performance. At the end of the day, what you should glean from that is how you should assign your time to the key activities in your business moving forward, because the time is our most precious resource. I use my time to hit the things which I think are the highest priority in any given day, right? And that's what's going to move the needle in my business. And so that's why I get really, yeah, I can be kind of a stick in the mud about that particular topic, but it's because I know that it's one of the most important things for us as an organization to be successful. I would extend that to just about every agency we work with as well, is you have to make sure that you're getting full benefit of the time that you're spending and the challenges or problems you're tackling in your agency each and every day.
Well, and this problem can arise at both ends of the spectrum. So classically, we think of like I'm not doing well, and I'm grasping for straws, and I'm looking at other options for me to try to find success when I should just double down on the thing I got into this business to do in the first place. But you can also feel this on the other end, where you've got like you're generating real cash, and it starts to burn a hole in your pocket. And you start to, sometimes we get asked for things like, oh, should I invest in this, or should we buy this thing, or should we do all this? And generally speaking, my answer is like, we are in the business to do the business. If you have interests that extend beyond this, distribute the money and go do that as a human, as a person, as an individual, and don't mess with commingling that and the core thing. So again, I just hear me, whether you're struggling or you're crushing it, because this lack of focus can bite you in both directions.
Yep. Let me give you another quick thing that I find from great performing agencies, or just agencies who take themselves seriously, which is, I'd have no better way to describe this other than they have a calling card of some kind, right? That is to say that even if they're not the best in the world, they can look at you with a straight face and tell you they're the best at X for Z industry. And I'm not saying that as a means to get people to niche down and focus very particularly on a certain. I'm not even going to get into that. I'm just telling you that they're known for something, and they have an expertise that the market needs and is still relevant in today's environment, right? And I think that last part is really important, because there's a lot of agencies who can do creative, who can do media, who can do digital, but like, what makes you really good at it? What makes you stick out from the crowd? And the organizations that we work with who are very serious and performing well have nailed that and continue to nail that and continue to evolve over time. And you can make a buck doing just about anything, but just because you can make a buck at it doesn't mean that it's a really good business, right? I think those two concepts are a little bit different. Just because I can freelance doesn't mean I can run an agency. And I think until you can really answer that question, I'd be hesitant to spin up an agency and grow it over time, because you have to have a calling card of some kind.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Uh, Let me add another thing that's kind of in the same realm of positioning in the market and ability to generate revenue, which is, I think our best, and this is somewhat specific, but I think our best. Let me rephrase. I know our best agencies, the ones that perform the best, have an ability to retain revenue. And in doing so, they put as much, if not more, emphasis on account management and the account function as they do on going out and generating new logos. And
Very
I
interesting.
I know this is a topic that you feel strongly about, but I think we've talked a lot about demand generation and a lot about sales and marketing in this. And I guess I just want to make the explicit point that that doesn't mean only going out and finding people you've never worked with before. Often our best agencies are spending a disproportionate amount of their time just farming at their current customers and not looking for new business. And that's a really, really important.
We could do multiple podcasts on that topic in particular. And listen, you could do it either way. You can bring a lot of new clients in. You just have to find a way to continue to gain um, cash flow from those clients or revenue from those clients, even if it's a smaller amount over an extended period of time. Or you just have to have an incredible sales and marketing engine that continues to produce time after time. Which, by the way, Upsource Accounting or Upsource is a version of that. We have a sales and marketing engine. We basically work on a retainer basis with our clients. We do depend on the next new business to come in the door, even though we have upgrades and that type of thing. But for the traditional agency who is project based in nature, I think it's always best to find that next project from a current client as opposed to the next one. And it's that type, and I have, we have assets available and we have account planning decks and all sorts of stuff, which emphasize the importance of having that proximity to your client and understanding their needs and delivering them more services, because that's much easier than going out and finding the next new client. And especially, I think we all feel how challenging that is in the environment that we're in right this second. It's never felt harder to find the next new client, to many of us, at least of our generation, than it has right now. And that's for many industries, not just the creative services industry in particular. And so I totally agree with you. If you have a strong account management function and you're continually producing revenue from key accounts, then you're probably doing pretty well and you're not just playing business.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And look, even Upsourced, I mean, we generate far more revenue in total than we generate of new business in a given year, right? Like the model relies on us retaining revenue. If you're not retain, if less than 50% of your revenue in a given year is coming from existing sources, you are in quicksand. Like it's going to be very, very difficult for you to grow, much less, to grow, even quite frankly, maintain. Okay. I'll make one. This is maybe my last one. This one's kind of easier. It's. I'm going in a much different direction. It's a little bit more straightforward. But it's a little bit near and dear to my heart too. I think. Um, Look, just candidly, if I look at, we often say that, for an agency of a sufficient scale, we are targeting somewhere between 45 and 50% gross margins. And that can vary a little bit depending on the type of agency. But like generally speaking, 20% net margins is like, that's kind of where that's like the bait. That is the, let's say, median of what a good agency looks like. But we absolutely have clients who are doing 30, 35% net margins. And there are a lot of things true about the 30 and 35% net margins. But also, one thing that's true about those businesses is that they are thrifty. Like they are just not spending money on shit they don't need. And that might look like hiring when it hurts. It might look like I'm not going to overinflate this leadership team or that. It's they just have a different mentality, right? Which is more needs based than desires based. And again, you can it comes down to just what kind of business are you looking for and what are you happy with. But for the most profitable agencies, they're just being relentlessly disciplined on how, I mean, I can let me just as one example, just a good one example. One of our, a client of ours that is, let's call it mid eight figures in revenue, right? Large, hundreds of employees. Um, collects cash in a variety of ways, but some way in like physical checks in the mail, because they have large clients and that's how those large clients want to pay. Um, they're gonna, they have a lockbox at a bank, and that bank wanted to increase the amount of money that they charged this client for using the lockbox up to like $200 a month. Mid eight figures of revenue, $200 a month, not moving the needle. Let me just tell you, this client's not having it. Not having it. And I mean, this is a dramatic example, by the way, but it just speaks to the mentality that client prints money because they are not wasting money, period. It's just in their DNA. And I think that's true of a lot of the most profitable businesses.
Yep, yep, I would totally agree with that. And to take it a step further, maybe I'm going back and forth between the do's and don'ts, but um, the firms that struggle are the ones that the owner has their identity so wrapped up in the firm and they use it as a means for their own lifestyle, right? To project their own lifestyle. And that story rarely ends well, to be honest with you. I think one of the important lessons that I have learned myself as, one third of this team here is for years and years, I did have the mindset that this was about me and what I could get out of it. And I think that's actually very natural in the early days when you're also doing an outsized portion of the work, right? Like when we're doing a lot of work or spending a lot of hours or risking it all to get things off the ground, you think about yourself. But there's a tipping point in every agency where you're no longer the most important thing. Even if you're the owner, you're no longer the most important thing. It's about the organization, and you need to make decisions that prioritize the organization and the team that supports that organization, because if you do that, the organization will take care of you. If you don't, then I would not expect that organization to be around for the long term to continue to support the things that you want in your life. And so, I tell people now, even like upsource success doesn't really depend on me really at all. It depends on the environment that we've created to make people successful, both while they're with us and in the longer term of their careers. And if we can continue to do that, I think Upsource will be successful. But it depends on our entire team. It really doesn't have much to do with me as an individual anymore. And I think that transition can be tough for a lot of owners, and they think too much about themselves and not enough about the priorities of their organization.
I think that was well said. I think that's well said. I couldn't agree more. Um,
Uh, can I ask you a question, Ryan, before this one is, I think, yeah, particularly, it might be a little prickly. How do you feel about mission driven organizations or B corporations or organizations who put forth who they are more than what the organization does itself? And I think you know what I'm saying. So like what's and by the way, I'm not saying that that can't work because it obviously does. But is can you still be successful in today's business world by being a mission driven agency first and a creative services agency second? Is there room for both? What do you think needs to get priority in that particular agency?
this is a real hornet's nest you've invited me into.
It is a hornet's nest.
Uh
Yeah.
huh. Uh huh. I should have asked this question. Listen, to answer the question, because I know, listen, we have clients that are certainly mission driven. I do think there is room for both. I think there is space for both. But look, your quote, whether it's Horowitz or whoever the hell it is, the main thing is the main thing. You got to keep the main thing the main thing. Listen, we are in this. Businesses are a key instrument of capitalism. Like, if you don't like that, you shouldn't do this. You know what I mean? Like, we are in business to generate a profit. And again, this isn't true in all elements of life, but the most um, selfless thing you can do for your people is run a good, profitable business that keeps them employed for many years to come. Period. That's the best thing you can do for everyone. Now, you can run your business in dishonest and deceitful and toxic ways, and I would not advocate for that. We don't do that, right? You can also pursue a business that has profit and as its primary motive in more honorable, mission driven ways. You can have values, I guess, said differently. Good organizations have values. Good organizations live their values and they stick to those values. But those values exist to support the business and not the other way around. And we see problems when businesses exist to support the values. And that's a not for profit. And they exist. And that's great. it's just not going to get you what I think you're looking for. And it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's very well said. I had Farah on last week from Big Duck, and that is an organization who is is a for-profit organization. They have a co-op model, so the employees all own a piece of the business, and it's an equity-based outcome. Um, and listen, they have a very intentional model that is mission driven, and the clients they serve are mission driven. But to your point, they are so intentional about how they do what they do, and they do it with running a good business in mind so that they can take care of each other and each other's families and their clients. That is the perfect execution in my mind of being able to do both. Um, i had a i had an old client years ago who they would donate the majority of their profits to a charitable trust of the owner, and I'm talking like billions of dollars over a couple of years type profits. And they always said, we have to do well to do good. And that's what I tell our clients as well is I have no problem if you are mission minded or want a share of your profits to go somewhere, or you even want to service a particular industry. I have no problem with that. But we have to do well in order to do good on the other end. And if we do not do well, we will not have the opportunity to serve the people or organizations that we would like to service. And so let's keep that the main priority. And then you and the people around you can continue to enjoy the just desserts of victory, so to speak, or a successful business, and help the people that you want to help. And so I think to your point, as long as you have the priorities in the right order, it's completely acceptable. I think it's when you lead with the other way around that things get obscured and it becomes much more challenging to have a clear line of thought and the appropriate objectivity in your decision making. And that's when we see things go sideways, unfortunately, in many cases. Yeah.
Well, Greg, listen, I think this was
Okay.
a good conversation. I mean, this is a soapbox topic for both of us.
It
It's
is.
completely near
Yes.
and dear to our heart, but it's a
It
thing
is.
that, I
Yeah.
mean, listen, if you're an entrepreneur, if you run a business, an agency, whatever it is, absolutely you have been guilty of probably all the things that we've talked about. I know that the two of us have. Hopefully, what we sought to try to do in this conversation is to give you some tools and some examples to be able to sort of step back and identify, oh, wait a minute, I'm taking action, but is this action moving the ball forward, or does this action give me the does this is this playing business? Is this giving me the illusion of moving the ball forward? And when you start to kind of distinguish between those two things, more productive decision making takes place. And hopefully we're able to help do that. So I guess with that, let's wrap it. Thanks for joining, Craig. Glad to have you. See you next time.
Good to be here. Thanks, Ryan. Cheers.